so that all those members who are not able to join today for some reason can actually benefit by having a look at the video later on. So starting with, you know, inviting with one question, we know all your name, but if you can share a little bit about yourself and when did you take the new exam and how and for what purpose? Just a little more of introduction, that would be good. We can start with you, Paula.
Sure. So I wrote the exam the middle of December 2023, so just a little over 6 months ago.
Thank you. You can pass it on to anybody, or maybe Nikki.
Sure. Hi there. My name is Nikki Monahan. I've been a professional coach for over 10 years. I graduated from the professional coaching program at Concordia University and certified as an ACC level coach, probably 9 years ago. But I took this exam June last year, and it was one of the most challenging exams that I've taken. But I have lots of ideas about how to prepare for it, and I'm really excited and have some things to share with you, and then really will be interested in what questions that you have.
Over to you, Laurie.
So I've been a coach for about 7 years now. Took my initial coach training through Ericsson International. Don't know if we got anybody alumni from there. Oh, good, great, Hi, Jenny. So I started mine in 2017, got my ACC very quickly afterwards, and then was a little bit slow on the uptake of moving to my 500 hours. Had my training, but not my hours. And then they did this, the new exam. And what was, and I agree with what you say, Nikki, quite challenging. But in the end, I'm so glad I did it because I learned a lot from it. I'll share a bit more about that a little bit later. But yeah, so it was really then that instigated my desire to get my 500 hours so I could get my designation, official designation from ICF as PCC. So I took my exam in October of last year.
Okay, wonderful. And while you were sharing that, Laurie, I was thinking that not everybody need to take the new exam. It's only when somebody is applying for new credential or you're upgrading a credential. Like if you were an ACC, now you want to go for PCC, or from PCC to MCC, then you need to take the exam. If you're ACC and continuing to just extend the ACC, then I don't think you need to take the exam, right? Okay,
That's
just
correct.
wanted to.
That's correct, Kamal. Can I just add a little bit of something to
Sure.
that, which that's absolutely right. It's only when you're initially or upgrading to another level. However, if you take the exam, say at ACC, and you pass the exam, if you get your 500 hours within the 12 months, you can apply for the next grade up without having to retake the exam.
So it's within 1 year if you are upgrading, then okay.
Correct.
Okay. And so now coming to another question, what have been your individual experience with this new exam? Because I also took it like 4 years back, and I knew when I had to give that exam, as usual, I was apprehensive, like, okay, there are these questions and then scenarios, and then how do we go about it? But now I think it's changed a little bit. It's not just one answer, but you have to pick between two, like what is the best and what is the worst. So, how was your experience overall with this new exam?
I think that's a great question. I think much like you, Kamal, and probably many people maybe who took I think it was called Coach Knowledge Assessment, CKA. I remember just reading a couple of things, taking a couple of sample questions, and didn't really need maybe as much experience even to take that exam. And also, probably a read through a couple of things and you were ready. this was quite the difference in preparing for it. And um, as you mentioned, there is a focus on capturing the best answer and then the worst answer. And I remember when I came to it, I'm like, why are they making us think about the worst answer? As coaches, why do we want to know the worst answer? Like that just doesn't make any sense. And so I remember going through the preparation of it, and as much as it was a difficulties exam, I remember at the end of it really understanding the value of seeing, because even the worst answer, maybe it touches on something, and it may even touch on a competency, but it may only be partially touching on a competency, or not have enough sort of meat in there. So I remember seeing the value of that, and you know I think the experience for myself, I think over the years has really helped me distinguish that. I don't know if I would have seen it right off the bat, um, had I not prepared in the way that I did for the exam.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump onto that, because really, in some ways, this is an exam you can't study for. And in other ways, it's an exam that all of your coaching, education, and experience, especially your coaching experience, will prepare you for. And there are ways to prepare, but maybe not like studying for an exam where you have to memorize content. And one of the reasons why I found it challenging is quite comprehensive. So 80 plus scenarios. You have 3 hours to write it. There's a break in the middle. And for each scenario, you have to choose what's the worst choice that the coach could make and what's the best choice. And so, every scenario is an application of your understanding of the competencies versus just recognizing, oh, I recognize that piece of knowledge, or I recognize that piece of content. And if you think about levels of learning, to just memorize something or understand something is a pretty low level, but to understand how to apply your knowledge, that's much higher, which makes it much more, I would say, much more robust and challenging exam. But I do want to say, because I've talked about how challenging it is, I went to the ICF website, and 75% of people who take the exam pass it the first time. So for those of you who are super anxious, know that there is a fairly high success rate.
That data does give some assurance. Laurie, coming to you, what have been your experience of this exam?
Yeah, well, it was a real shift, because when I did the ACC, I mean, part of it is the apprehension, because it's a test. It's timed. It's timed. The original one, the CKA, was 3 hours, but you could go in, come back, go in, come back. It was open book. So it was a lot more. Here it's proctored. It is, and I did mine online. I didn't go to a testing center, but I did mine online. It's 3 hours. It's a lot of time. And there is a right and a wrong answer. And you know what is challenging? Because the key is it's the best and the worst. So when you get into these scenarios, they both of them could be applied, but it's what's the best and what's the worst of the worst. So there's a bit more challenge. And I like what you said, Nikki. It's not about knowing the ICF competencies. It's about the application and how that plays in. That makes it a real challenge.
So, one question that comes to me from this is that for those coaches who are just getting into the field of coaching from other professions, and who probably haven't had that much of an experience with the coaching competencies, how do you see them faring through this exam? Because for somebody who's coaching for 5 years, 6 years, or maybe longer, you have a very good understanding and identification and experience of those competencies. So, do you think it's more challenging for the new coaches? And then what can they do?
I can start that, and then maybe Paula and Lori can join in. I absolutely think it's going to be more challenging for newer coaches with less coaching experiences, or what I would call emerging coaches. And I teach in the Concordia University coaching program, and our emerging coaches often say, "Well, how can I analyze these scenarios when I haven't been in these situations?" Which is a valid question. But really, at the heart and at the core of this exam is it's not an exam that tests theory. It's not an exam that tests models or approaches. So you don't have to know about narrative approaches to coaching, or you don't have to know about theory of change. But you do need to know the ICF competencies inside and out. And so, if you don't have a lot of coaching experience, but you can really work with those competencies and then think about how would those play out in terms of what would be a violation of a competency and what would be a demonstration of an excellent sign that the competency was being used in a coaching session. I think that's what's going to help you the most. And one of the ways that I've had students from Concordia University program prepare is there's lots of places you can go online and find coaching videos and just watch some of the videos. And as you watch them, sort of earmark them. Okay, so this is where, establishing an agreement happened, or this is where, there was a demonstration of cultivating trust or safety, and this is where someone was evoking awareness. So that you can really not just know what the competencies are, but know what they look like in real coaching practice, even if you don't have years and years of practice yourself. That would be one route that I would go.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I
I,
think
I would I would definitely add to that. And even being a coach has been doing this now for a couple of years. Um, I did find at the end of it, I gained a much deeper appreciation for the competencies. And so, while I have the experience in certain situations, that is actually not necessarily the right answer. So the way that I might handle a situation as a coach, intuitively with some experience, is not necessarily the right answer either. So I took Lissa DeHart's paid program. She has a wonderful program. I highly recommend it. She has a lot of free resources, but I did a walk through her paid program, and she really pulled that stuff apart and helped you understand the reasoning of the best answer and the worst answer. So I think that I really do wholeheartedly believe that even without a lot of experience, if you study the approach to how to dissect the question, the way that many coaches like Lissa or other people have, I think that you could have success on it. So it's really understanding, how does ICF think, and what does ICF want you to say in this regard. That was a shift I had to make in my mind around that.
I love that, Paula. I couldn't agree more. This is what you have to keep in mind is what does from the ICF competencies, going to be a little bit controversial with what you said, Nikki, in that I think in some ways ACC newer coaches may find it slightly easier because they're more focused on the actual competencies. They haven't got a larger framework. Like I found myself at times after the number of hours of coaching going, I need a bit more context to really tell you which is the best of the best or which is the actual worst of the worst. So, yeah. And I think it's this whole thing about you got to relax. Okay, first and foremost, I mean, and I was like freaking out. Sorry, just like I just freaking out about it. And the first thing is just got to calm down. I mean, and look at this. It's a new situation. And I had a good talk self-coaching with myself saying, okay, wait a minute. I know this information. It's what Nikki and Paula both shared here. Really important to get a really deep dive into all the resources that ICF has, and there are tons of them on the global one, and to really to break them down. I find even like writing the stuff out. Don't just read the stuff, or watching them. So I used to watch the videos. I listened to podcasts. I memorized sort of the competencies. Then I wrote them out. I did little drawings that would be concise with that. And then as you, and as was stated about, then starting to apply them and thinking them through was very helpful for me. It was just like, okay, here's the task at hand. Not, don't worry, like we're just one step at a time.
And
I want to add to that, Kamal, if I could. One of the pieces of advice, and it was hard to do, and I didn't do it successfully all the time, but I did try to adhere to it. And again, Lissa was someone who shared this, was getting to the point of reading the answers first, and then the question. And I remember going, oh my goodness. So I remember trying that in the test questions, like the eight that ICF has. She has 12. There's like a 51 exam simulator. I remember trying that approach, and I would, sometimes get really good, and sometimes it'd be like, oh my gosh, it's completely. So I'd have to go back and dissect, what was happening there. And so on the exam day, I thought, oh, I don't know if I can do that. But I found myself doing that. And then I found, well, oh, these are really tough to distinguish the best and the worst. Then I'd go and read the question. And so I found that helped me save a little bit of time, because there's a lot of, extra information sometimes in the body of the question or the scenario. And then you're like, is that relevant? And so that was a really, I think, and again, another really important way to approach the exam that I would never have thought of doing before.
yeah, and if I can just add in, and Liv's got some amazing suggestions in the chat there. So, for example, like with any multiple choice test, thank you, Liv, read the whole answer, whether you read the answers first or the scenario, read it all before you jump to the answers. And in my experience, it was because lots of us have test anxiety, and I think this is what Lori was saying, like try and relax, manage your own test anxiety. One of the things that I did to manage my test anxiety was I chose to do it at a site, because I didn't want to have to worry, was I going to have any technical problems? Was I going to have any software loading problems? Was I going to have any of that? So I eliminated some of my anxiety. And for some of you, it might be, no, taking it at home is going to be way less anxiety producing than going to a test site. So that's a decision. I also noticed that in terms of building my confidence at the beginning of the test, when we went through the first few items, I noticed it was much easier for me to pick the worst response first. And so I did that. I used that pattern of, because the worst response is usually one that violates the ICF code of ethics, or maybe clearly is demonstrating how not to do a competency. And so for me, the first answer was, okay, I'm going to pick what the worst response is, because sometimes then distinguishing between good, better, and best was a little harder, but I built up some confidence. And it might help you also to know that you don't lose points. So let's say in any given scenario, if you get the worst response correct, but you don't get the best response correct, you're not losing points. So you're gaining points for every correct answer. And that somehow reassured me that, I was pretty sure for almost all of them, I had what the worst response was. So I figured I was at a 50% right from the get-go, and math's not my strong suit. So that's very strategic tips.
Playing to your strength. What comes first to you?
Can
Laurie,
I speak to this anxiety? I have an anxiety tip for my thing going into it. Because I did a mock test, and so I'm reading the question before and I ran out of time. So now I'm panicked that I'm going to run out of time. So what I did is I started timing, and so I did the math, not strong suit, but ahead of time, and I found we had for each question you have an average of 2 minutes per question. So I just got comfortable with what is 2 minutes. What can I do in 2 minutes? And for me, I found that I could, and I didn't realize when I first did it, I would read it then do my what's the best. Then I would read the question again and do my worst. Not a good plan. Read the whole scenario. I found I had time to read it through twice and then answer the questions. But I knew what my timeline was. And some of them came very quickly for me. The other ones that I was unsure of, you can tag them and come back only for each half. Not only like there's a 5-minute break. So for the ones you're very comfortable with, just go ahead. If you've got any question, just tag them at the end of that first half. You can go back and then re-look at them. But make sure to, because of what Nikki said, you don't get a demerit for wrong answer them all, even if you're getting close to the end of the time. Just trust your instincts and just go through it.
And Lori, I would add, like, I think that tip about tagging is really good, but a colleague of mine had done it first time, and she tagged them but didn't answer them, and then she ran out of time. So my suggestion is actually answer instinctually what you think that is, tag it, and then come back to it if you have the time. And I ran into that. And in the first half, I didn't have much time to go back to all the ones I tagged, but I knew I had an answer. So that, that might be a thing too. Don't leave anything not answered, even on the first pass.
And what was occurring to me, Laurie, when you were mentioning about 2 minutes, like get comfortable with 2 minutes for each question. I would say if your mind is calm, 2 minutes is a good enough time. If your mind is agitated, 2 minutes is nothing. It just ran past. And that's what we were discussing, Paulo and I, earlier, like how we see that now the time sort of flies by and we don't realize. So I think it's also up to how we are preparing our mind to stay calm and settled and say, yes, it's an exam, but I can do it and it will happen. So looking at what are the positive sides and what are the things in your stride that you can use for preparing for this exam.
I would also add a tip just so that everybody knows is you can walk into the exam and they give you like if you're going into a proctored center, they give you a moment to write down like I think 2 minutes or 3 minutes to write down anything you want to write down. So, and again, I cite Lissa because she has some beautiful acronyms that help. So I sat down and I wrote down all the stuff. I did like my brain dump and it was there for me. And so if I was like, oh, struggling, I could go back to my little acronyms that were created as a resource. So keep that in mind, do that brain dump if you have some things that you want to kind of jot down before you start.
There's an interesting sharing I want to bring out by Marilyn. She says, my sabotiers are having a riot with my exam anxiety. I did, but hit the wall and exam anxiety every single time. Okay. Having, yes, yeah. Okay. So as coaches, what do we do for those exam anxieties? Like, how do we prepare ourselves?
As coaches, often what we work with our clients are, mindsets and maybe negative self-talk. And so, I would say if you can think about how to create a positive mindset, whatever works for you to do that. And I don't want to belittle exam anxiety. I mean, it's real. I'm a faculty coach at George Brown College, and I've worked with faculty for many years. And students who have exam anxiety, really sometimes feel like the format of a test is kind of punitive. So, and it's not. It's meant to be an opportunity for you to demonstrate how you can apply those core competencies. But the mindset that you go into the exam with is really important. And, if you may know for yourself what helps you shift your thinking. So for me, it might be, what's the worst thing that could happen? I could fail and then I take it again. If you're a surgeon, the worst thing that happens is somebody dies on the operating table. If you're taking this test, the worst thing that can happen is that you fail and you have to take it again. And then that's information for you about, that there are some things to look at. And what's the best thing that can happen? You pass. I had a fortuitous event happen to me because I went to a site and it wasn't open. I got there early because I'm anxious and I deal with my anxiety by getting there early, and it wasn't open yet. And there was a young woman there who was taking an exam to pass her veterinary tech license, and she was having to memorize dosages of drugs to give dogs for things. And I thought, oh my gosh, at least I don't have to memorize anything. Like I know this or I don't know this. I would say, Marilyn, you know how to manage your own anxiety more than anybody else can. And I think, think about what kind of positive mindset you want to have, and then also how you know for yourself how to shift some of that negative self-talk into positive self-talk, and that can help a lot. And then there are all those just basic things in terms of managing anxiety. If it's better for you to eat, eat. If it's better for you not to eat, don't eat. Don't forget to breathe. Sometimes when we're anxious, we forget to breathe. All of those are basic self-care things for managing anxiety. And your saboteurs are only one part. So call on those other parts, right? You've got parts of yourself that are confident and competent, and you can let them just send the saboteurs out the door, because they're only one of your parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that about the parts. And if I could just add, the state is important, and there's preparation for this, and just like one of the tips is, do not try to cram to the learning of the ICF competencies at the last moment, and take it in bits. But for the same token, for your state, do not think about how am I going to be the day before. Take that into part of your preparation. Use visualization. Imagine whether you're going to be at home, sitting in front of your desk. That's what I did when I did at home. I would take time. I'd do a slight meditation on a daily basis. Okay, I'm here. I would even, when I got closer, I cleared my desk. I made sure I was looking at the camera. I practiced that too, just to see yourself experiencing it. There's great value from a neurological standpoint, in the brain doesn't know the difference between when you're actually there and actually doing it. But if you see it and you put yourself in that, where I'm calm, I'm focused, you can't be anxious and thinking at the same time. So get your plan in action. What are you there to do? You're there to really step into the breaking down of this problem. So practice that leading up to it, and do it like week or two before. Every day, take time, creating that experience that you're going to have for exam day.
I think this is a fabulous conversation, and Marilyn, I never did well on exam, like it's just the like performance anxiety, examining, whatever you want to call it. And it's really interesting having gone through this, and doing as much preparation. I did not take it lightly. I wanted to try and get it done in one shot. And so I think I found myself, just the approaches I took this time, I'm a different person than 20 years ago when I had to do these types of exams, or and so I had to acknowledge that there's some gray matter that really kind of did sit around, and rest in there. And I think that point, Laura and Nikki, that you talked about, is like, trusting yourself too, that you're probably not the 20-year-old that took, those exams that were really, really difficult as well. So I think it was an opportunity to really step into new parts of myself, to say, hey, you know what? I'm actually better now at this age to do this stuff, surprisingly. So.
Wonderful. So those are some really fine strategies to take care of our mindset and calming ourselves and tackling the emotional bits. I know my son comes up with a lot of anxiety sometimes, and so I always ask him, I said, how are you already anticipating the outcome to be? Because anxiety comes from a space where we have already thought of an outcome. and are, banking on the surety of it to happen. So just challenging our thought process in this moment is helpful. Coming to your personal strategies, like what all, I know in bits and pieces you've already spoken about how you prepared, but if you can elaborate on what really you did, what are the different strategies that you used to prepare for the exam? Apart from being absolutely familiar with all the competency markers, what helped? What more helped you?
Well, maybe I'll jump in, Kamal, on that one. So, absolutely familiar with the competency markers is the foundation of preparation. And somebody said, how long do you prepare for? So I would say, my preparation was 2 or 3 weeks plus 10 years of coaching. So there's different ways to prepare. But in terms of the specific, so foundational preparation is really important. One of the things that I did was, and I knew what all of the ICF competencies and markers were. But what I did in preparation was I took every one and I did about 2 a day. And I looked at all of the elements of a competency. So let's say, a coaching mindset, is one of the foundational ones. And then I looked at every element of the coaching mindset and I thought about what that would look like if it was present or if it was absent, right? So curiosity is part of the coaching mindset. So if I read a scenario and it shows that the coach demonstrates absolutely no curiosity in that scenario, then I would say, okay, well, that's a violation of that credential. Or I would say, what does curiosity actually really look like in a coaching scenario? So I went through every single competency one by one, every single sub point, every single marker, and I asked myself, in a coaching session, what does that actually look like? And then what would it look like if the person was not demonstrating this? So if being respectful is a marker, then what would being disrespectful look like in a scenario? So that's how I started. And then I also spent some time thinking about, as I read a scenario in the exam, and you can use the sample questions. So without looking at the answers to the sample questions, use the sample questions. And then when you see the scenario, ask yourself, which of the competencies are really coming up in this scenario? And then when you do that, you can say, okay, so what's being demonstrated, what's not being demonstrated, what's being violated. So yeah, Kamal, I would say for sure know what the competencies are. But my preparation was very, it seemed like, quite minute, but I went marker by marker by marker, and I asked myself, in a scenario, what would it look like if the coach was doing this? And what would it look like if the coach was not doing this? And that helped me a lot.
That's a great approach. That's exactly what I did too, because that there's a lot of competencies, there's a lot of detail, and I think just glossing over it isn't definitely a strategy. And there were other components to the exam too around ethics, and so there's ICF has a document on ethics, and I remember I was preparing for our session today, and I was like, God, what did I print? And I remember printing, there was a document, it's called Insights and Considerations for Ethics. And that was a really interesting, very long document. And again, taking into factoring in what are some of the considerations for the ethics. So not just reading the ethics that we have as coaches, but really kind of delving into that topic. And there's something as well about if you have to refer, when do you refer a client to therapy? So there's documents specific to that. So I created a stack of ended up printed material to really read the whole booklet. And I thought, oh my God, this feels like overkill, but it represents one question maybe on the exam for each one of those things. But you add them up, that could be 5 questions. And it's like, so it's like, I don't want to lose those 5 questions. So I want to make sure that I really take the time. So I kind of approach this like a project plan. My husband's a project manager, and I said, okay, I need to approach it like he does, and bit by bit over a month period or whatever that time frame was, and really break it down, and then have that time then to bring it all together and breathe. Okay, now I want a week now to just breathe and just know that I've gone all through all this stuff as well. So I do feel like it does need some time to really air all that stuff and really be able to have it be part of your thinking on exam day as well.
Yeah, I agree with what you both have already shared with the competencies, and I was going to say my journey was like the ethics, and I would start reading the documents, and I thought, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend, but I went, oh God, just can't get through this. But that was my initial, okay, and then I said, okay, give myself a shake. And as I started to delve into it, the ethics are, I found, not, and I agree with what you said, Paul, and that insights and considerations was good, but just all the ethics. And as you start reading through them, it really does marry with the ICF competencies. So I started seeing the connections. Oh, okay, all this talk about these categories in each state, just like with the core competencies, how they relate to one another. It was a game changer for me to really start delving into it, and not only reading it, but there's some great video series ICF Global has. I would be, doing the house cleaning. I'd have these running just to listen to them. There's another great one that I found it's called, sorry, I have my little cheat notes here because I want to make sure, from Coach for Life. Peter J. Redding's got a series on. He's an MCC coach. He's a trainer and coach. He does a whole series on the ICF competencies and the ethics. And I found listening to those were really helpful. All free. You can look it up on the internet. Yeah. And same thing. It's not, and I would say same kind of time. You don't want to say, okay, I'm going to book my exam 6 months from now. There's that, you got to know yourself, but there's that leeway. It's what's too much time and what's too little time. Give yourself a good breathing space. Maybe it is 2 to 3 weeks. You have to decide. I don't think any one of us have the ultimate answer. It's like, thyself. Where's that frame that I work best in? And then make it a priority, make it a goal in that time period to take those couple of each day doing something, whatever works for you, and know your why. I love that too, about why you're doing this, about this anxiety. Well, but why is it important that you do this rather than worrying about what might happen? What would happen if you don't do it?
We've been talking a lot about the importance of the ethics, and I will just say, like, if you know the ICF Code of Ethics and you've read some of those materials about ethics, then some of the answers are so obvious, because in any scenario, the worst response is anything that violates the Code of Ethics. So that's almost like a gimme, So if you know those Code of Ethics inside and out, and you can see, oh, that's what an unethical coach would do. This is what a coach who's adhering to the ICF Code of Ethics would do. The other thing that I would suggest, and this is around, the foundational information, coaching ethics, coaching mindset, is also be really, really clear, and there's lots of materials about this, be really, really clear about what is the role of a coach. And in any of these scenarios, you might see the worst response is if somebody is acting as a consultant and not as a coach, or as a therapist and not as a coach. So if you can have in your mind, what's the difference between a coach, a consultant, and a therapist, that's going to help you a lot too. And Liv put some beautiful information in the chat there about, the 3 things that you absolutely don't want to do. Pay attention is the coach in the scenario, directing, diagnosing, or distorting. So consultants often direct. They tell you what they think the best course of action is. Therapists often diagnose and say, oh, this is a mental health disorder. And distorting often comes with interpretation, which is a more like a therapist sort of approach. So if you can have really clear in your mind, what's the difference between a coach, a consultant, and a therapist? And then what are the things that coaches almost always do in best practices is they establish agreements, they establish clear topics, they establish outcomes for a session, they establish who they are, they establish what coaching is, so all of that sort of stuff. They let the client take the lead, they let the client make the plan, they let the client, make it a robust plan. So if you have a lot of clarity about what is the role of the coach, and you'll see in some of the scenarios, it's like, oh, that person's not coaching, they're consulting, or that person's acting like a therapist. And that can be helpful. Be on the lookout for coaching versus consulting, teaching, advising, mentoring, all of those things that are not exactly coaching. And some of those are subtle, some of those are very subtle. And so when you're trying to decide, which is the best, it might be easy to see the worst, but which is the best? Ask yourself, what do coaches do, not do what do consultants and therapists do? That was helpful for me in terms of.
And if I can just add a couple of other things that's coming up that you're talking about, just the language. It's not foolproof, but watch the verbs that are used in those scenarios. What is the verb? That can be very clear. And the other big thing is consider, where are you in the coaching session? Because if it's the beginning, it could be a different answer from if you're in the middle or at the end where there's some action. So be really aware of that. But there are no, I know there's a lot of stuff flying around different groups, and with testing, it has value, but it's not carte blanche. And again, I'm going to say what works for you, because I started finding some of these tests. I even did one that was a paid for one, but I found it more confusing because there was some discrepancy in it. I found, what? This is not helping me. It's making me more anxious because now I'm second guessing everything. So I went back to use them to kind of break it down and think about it, but I'm not going to what they say the correct answer is, because I'm going to really spin out of control. So I came back to, what do I need to know and understand?
I think what's really neat now is that the body of resources is growing, free and paid. I think for those who went through it in the beginning, my goodness, hats off to people. But I think, as you said, Laura, I remember as I was doing it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to rely on Lissa's stuff, and I'm going to rely on the simulator here, and that's it. And then as I was studying, I saw more stuff coming on the internet. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't done that. I thought, no, I don't need to confuse, just because there's more stuff coming on, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to arm me with more. Stick to the principles that I've got and really just, kind of go. But I think there's just a multitude of resources that are really coming on board here. So it's not a bad time to be having access to all these resources too as well.
And I would just add to that, just be careful that you don't overwhelm yourself with resources. There's so many resources now. How do you choose? And I would say it's an ICF exam. And so the ICF resources are the best resources to prepare for the ICF exam, right? So, it's kind of a no-brainer, but people have different interpretations, but I would say that the resources that the ICF provides are the ones that are kind of most closely aligned with the ICF exam.
Wonderful. And in this conversation, apart from your experience and what you've shared, we have the chat box going live with so many links and so many things. Curtsy Liv and other coaches who are populating this with all the links. So what we'll try and do is make a summary of all of this and then send this along with the recording of the session as well, so that everybody can use it. But I absolutely love what you all have said, that to know what you need to be prepared for, and then stick to that information and know that yes, you are ready. So as long as we have a very clear understanding of what these markers are, what they stand for. And Laurie, I really liked your little tip and trick into pay attention to the verb, pay attention to how the question is framed and formed, because looking deeply into can give us the clues for the answers. Then using ICF entirely, because right on the ICF website, there are so many things, and we now have got the links to all of those pages. So it's simple to download and read through them. I would like to open it to our coaching community. Any other questions that you have, any other burning questions that you would like to bring to our panel today? You can unmute yourself, just ask away the questions. Yes.
So I'm hearing from people that most people don't have a chance to go back and reread the questions that they flagged. For the exam test takers, what was your experience with that? Did you get a chance to go back and read what you flagged?
I didn't go back at all. I didn't flag, because I think one of the most common errors in multiple choice test taking is overthinking it and, rethinking, oh, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. I would say, if you know this stuff, your first instinct is the best instinct. So I answered them all. I had time to go back, but I didn't, because I thought, oh, I don't want to overthink it. But other people have different approaches.
Yeah, I think I flagged a few more in the first round. I had some energy and then I first started. And I did go back to I think I might have flagged about 6 or 7. And I think I had the opportunity to go back to about 5 of them. But I didn't sweat it. I thought, I trusted my and maybe the ones I changed. There were a few that I did change. Maybe the ones I changed made a difference. But I don't think with that many, I don't think it probably did, just based on the score and stuff. But I like that option to be able to go back, because sometimes like you're looking at it and you're just like, it's almost like you can draw a blank on just one very intense question. And you remember, like, there's so many questions, right? So it's not like the one question is going to be the deciding factor. So I think when I got to the second half of it, I definitely flagged a lot less. I actually had more time to go back, but I said to myself, no, I'm good. I don't even want to go back to even the ones I flagged.
For me, this is a great question, Liv, because 3 hours I found to be a very long time. So I tagged in both ones. First half I was quite comfortable. I tagged a few, was able to go back comfortably and complete. The second half, I felt the energy, like you get a 5-minute break, right? And I felt my energy sapping. It took a lower focus. It's, again, doing it at home, you got to make sure. I tend to look up when I think, and sometimes I like to read stuff out loud. You cannot do any of that stuff when you're being proctored. You can't even move your lips, and you've got to keep your head facing the camera. So I practiced that stuff ahead of time. But the second half, I was feeling tired. So that's another point, is when you pick your exam time, when are you freshest? Is it in the morning? So make sure you pick a time what is best for you, and do you need to eat or not eat? How are you how's your energy level going to be?
I have a couple of clarifying questions. First of all, someone who I'm in a mastermind with wrote her exam today. Well, probably nighttime for us because she's in Europe, and she got her results immediately at the end, but her exam was 4 hours. And she did it in a testing center. So I just want to confirm, I heard 3 hours here a few times. So just confirming that it's 3 hours. That it's 3 hours at a testing center or at home. So that's my first question. My second question is just clarifying my understanding. doesn't matter what level you're at, you're writing the same exam. So I'm assuming from that then that your score at the end of the exam determines whether or not you have achieved the level that you are writing the exam at, whether that's MCC or PCC or ACC. Can someone just confirm those things for me?
Well, it's the same exam for everybody right now. So it's exactly the same. So it's just a matter of whether you've passed or failed.
So there's no
Is what
levels,
it
like
is.
you pass at MCC, you pass at PCC, you pass at ACC.
That right now, yeah, they're looking at developing like a different exam, but right now, it is still all the same exam for everybody.
Okay.
And as far as the time goes, where there might be that problem is that it's 3 hours for English speaking. If English is not your first language, you can apply differently and it's a longer period. I don't know. I don't know whether one of the other panelists or Kamal, you know, what the time length is allowed if English is your second language, if you apply for that.
Okay.
I did hear that too, as well. And I did hear like, if you have and I don't know if that's the right term, if you have a learning disability, you can write to ICF. So you have to do all of that in advance. I think you have to do that before you book. And so you can get, that will probably allow for more time. So, if there is something that is in your space around that and you have that, then definitely write to ICF. And I think that that's factored in as well into more time.
That's one part of today's conversation which we didn't have much of an experience with, which was with accommodations. And some of the members did say that they had some questions. So that's something which we do not have much of a knowledge of, but for sure there is a provision where ICF support offers those accommodations. So,
And I'm
but
just
we
looking back at my notes. It's 87 minutes for 41 questions and then 85 minutes for 40 questions. That's sort of the breakdown of the first and second half.
Okay. So, Jen?
Hi. Yes. So I'm curious about the experience at a testing center. So I'm booked to write the ACC exam next week. And so I think it was Paula that mentioned having time to make notes. Did you do it at a testing center as well?
Yes, I did. Yes.
And like, can you bring in water? Like, can you bring, like, can you take a snack at the 5-minute break? Like, in terms of energy reserve, like these are some of the like.
Yeah, they in the center I went to, I was actually very strategic about which center. I did not want to be in I wanted to know where my parking was. I wanted to have all that stuff figured out. So I went and I checked it out before I called them even and before I booked the test. But they allow you to bring water into the center, but it's in the locker. And then at the break, you can grab your drink of water, use the bathroom, and come back. And then they give you it's not even a piece of paper. It's actually like almost like a whiteboardish type thing that you just then rub. You write your things down. It's actually with very chunky pen. So I was like, oh, I'm not getting much on this document here.
Oh, man.
And so then I did that in preparation, and that still comes with you like to the second half as well. That's in the room there as well.
Okay.
I think I had a Kleenex there. I think I took some. I was having a little bit of a tickle, so I had some cough drops. I explained that, but that was it. I don't think I don't think the water was able to come in with it.
Was someone in the room with you, or you just got kind of locked in?
There wasn't someone in the room, but there's cameras.
Okay.
So and you could be in a room with other test takers with other exams as well. So
Okay.
yeah, so you don't want to be like, oh my gosh, he got up and I'm not right there. You could be on different things. I was very lucky. No one ended up being in my test center in that room. So I was like, I made all the noises I needed to make when I was, angry at a question or something.
I hope I have
And I just want to jump in as someone who took the test at the test site too. ICF does have like a decision tree that you can use to make the decision, and it's worth. Liv put it in the chat. Thanks again, Liv. It's worth spending time thinking about the pros and cons of taking your test at home versus taking it at a test site, you know, because if you're at home, you need to be conscious, as Lori told us, about, you know, how you're being monitored or proctored. And then when you're at the testing site, I was in a room, there were two other people taking the test, and one of the guys had kind of an annoying cough, and I was distracted by it. But you know, like there are things that you can think about that might say, for me, it might be better to do it at home, or it might be better to do it at a site. But the people at the site where I took my test were lovely. They were calming. You know, the process is the same. You put your stuff in the locker, as Paula said. You have the break, and it worked well. But there's good reasons why you might want to do it at home as well. So,
Liv, I see you put in a question in the chat box. Do you want to explain that question where you say were competencies pitted against each other in single question? You're mute. You're on mute. Yeah.
So choosing the best and the worst question, do you ever find like, well, that would be the best answer if I'm trying to lead with, lead with mindset, or this would be the best if, another competency? Do you just find yourself like, well, what competency are they trying to test in this particular question? Or is it pretty clear that one question, one scenario, one competency is being tested? And if you can just cue into that competency, you don't have to worry about like, which is the more important one in this case? Does that question make sense? Mm-hmm. No, I can go back to drawing board and try and clean it up in my head a bit more before it comes out. I'm just wondering if...
I think that's a really good question. And I mean, because it goes by so fast, I felt, and I felt it was like like it was really focusing on one competency. There might be some ethics in there as well, but I didn't feel like it was, I was trying to figure out, oh, what are the two competencies? But I also didn't have the time to say, oh, that's that competency only. You know what I mean? I think it's sort of like knowing them all, if you have that time to just sit and let them all sort of be absorbed in you, then it might come a little easier as opposed to trying to say that's the one. I thought that's what I would do, Liv, and I didn't even have the time to.
Yeah, that's what everyone's saying. Like, I just don't even have the time to read through in 2 minutes to just like, okay, which competency is this? Yeah. It's like, it almost seems like you gotta have to step back and have an overall holistic view.
Holistic. That's exactly the word that was coming up for me, Liv. That's why it's so important to really delve into this stuff. And, when we talk about, well, what are they? That's when you get into those really where you're stuck. Then you might use those as your cues. But when you've really, that information has really seeped into, then you've got to trust that intuition, that you just know intuitively, okay, that if these two are the worst, these are the worst answers, these are the best, and then from there, which one is the worst of the worst?
And Liv, I might, I would agree with what Lori said. If your knowledge and understanding and your capacity to apply these competencies is really integrated, well integrated, then what you described might fall in the category of overthinking it, so we want to avoid overthinking it. So if you're really having a debate with yourself, just go back to that. Okay, so what does my intuition tell me based on, really well integrated understanding of the competencies?
And then my other question is, the domain is laid out by the, sorry.
No, can you come back to your question in a while?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Sorry.
I noticed Sherry and also raised her hand earlier. I just didn't see it. So Sherry, coming to you for your question.
Hi, thanks. Great conversation tonight. Thank you all very much for sharing your experiences. I'm just trying to kind of get maybe my brain is a little foggy, but I'm just trying to get a feel for what the exam format was like. I saw it briefly. I know it's in the chat. And is it sort of the same for whether you do it at home or in person, in terms of there are two halves and you have to do the first half, then there's a break, then you do the second half, and then you're done. Did I catch that right? Is that the way it kind of works? And then I heard there's a lot of restrictions about what you can have around you if you go to a test center versus, like, if I'm at home, can I have water beside me? Like, is anybody gonna care? Like, I'm not sure what that actually, how they would know that, or what. I guess they would see me drinking on camera. I don't know what,
Let
how.
me speak to, I can speak to when you're doing it from home.
Oh,
So
great.
clear desk, no water, nothing on your desk at all. Okay, it's got to be clear. When you make sure when you sign up, you come about 30 minutes before, because the proctor has to come into your space, each one. So if there's a bunch of people starting at the same time, you got to make sure you're there ahead enough a time, because when it starts, it starts. They will ask you to show your room. You have to take pictures of it, different portions of your room, send it to them. And I actually had to lift my laptop and then show it so he could see what was behind, to make sure that
Oh,
that was clear. So cannot have anything on your desk, no water, no Kleenex, no cough mints or anything like that. And the other thing that I want to point out that I was a little surprised at, because when I read through all the ICF stuff, it said to make sure you have valid ID. And I didn't know that my Ontario provincial photo health card has to have a picture, is not valid ID. So just be aware of that. That took me a bit by surprise. When I started the test, there was this little mark on the questions that I couldn't see, and I didn't want to stop at that point. So through the whole first half, I was able to make out the word, each one. But then at the break, had the proctor come back on, told him about it, and he fixed it. As a result, my 5-minute break ended up being 2 minutes long, but the second half was clear. So nothing on your desk at all. And yeah, I hope that answers everything, Sherry, as far as doing it on. And the reason I chose online is because I live outside of Toronto. That travel time would have been very long. I don't need to worry about traffic and parking and all that stuff. So for me, being in my own environment was the reason I chose to do it here.
yeah. Yeah,
And
I heard somebody mention that I think it was Nikki who said that there's an online somewhere. There's you can do a compare on home versus, or like online versus
yeah,
in person. Did you say
when
that?
you go to the ICF, it's a resource. It's called a decision tree, and
Okay.
Liv put it in the chat. So if you scroll back up in the chat, and it's something you can ask yourself. If this, then maybe on site is better. If this, then maybe at home is better. The part of the question that you asked though at the beginning was, is it the same exam if you do it at a proctored site or at home? And it's absolutely the same exam, and it's the same format: part one, break, part two. So you're getting the exact same exam whether you write it at home or you write it at a proctored site.
Yeah, I just was curious if you can, if it was like this two distinct halves, and it sounds like it is. So although it's one exam, it's once you do the first half and you come back from the break, you can't go back through the first half again, right? It's kind of not
That's
accessible.
correct. And Sherry Ann Robin's been kind enough to put that link again in the chat,
Yeah.
so it's fresh in the chat for you.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. I was trying to download or save the chat. It looks like it saves, but I haven't been able to verify that it is. So hopefully it will. Thanks very much, everybody.
I want to also answer, there's a place on that where you can go test your system too. And that's really important if you're planning to do it at home. And you don't have to sign up. You can do it like anonymously. So you don't have to set your exam, just go in the system. And because there's some programs also tell you that it's stopping them from being able to do the test. And you can find those ahead of time in your computer and turn them off. And I tested, before I even set up my exam, then I tested the week before. I tested again the day before and the day of before, just to make sure no surprises, like eliminate anything, because I ended up having a surprise, but I was able to handle that one because everything else I had watched out for. So, it's not like it's just a lot of information. I don't mean to make you more anxious. It's just it's all there. It's all doable. Really is my messaging, and to just take it a step at a time. You can do it. We've done it.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not I mean I've written several exams and I've written a lot of multiple guess. So they do, but it's been quite a while. So there is a bit of a knack to it when you're in it all the time versus, when you've left it and you come back to it. But I think there were some great tips here, and as long as you stay calm and you read the question carefully and you understand what they're asking for. Somebody also mentioned keeping in mind that it's what is the what is the ICF looking for here, and that sort of thing. So I think that's all really, really helpful information to sort of, keep in mind when you're going through the study process. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, Sherry. There's one question that Robin asks in the chat box, and Paula, I think it's for you. When you shared, like right before the exam, you just did a mind dump and wrote a few things. So she's asking, what were some items that you wrote down the few minutes before you started the exam that you found helpful?
Yeah, great question. So in Alyssa's program, there were a couple of acronyms that she had, and I think there's some of the stuff in there, her free material as well. It's sort of like, it was called traps, and is the scenario, is the coach telling or teaching? Is the coach reminding or recommending? Is the coach advising or leading? So I wrote those things down so that when I looked at a scenario, if I saw any of that happening, those were the things not to do. And then what did you want to look at? And so then she had another set of acronyms for that as well. So those are the things that, again, that was just something she recommended. And I did find that very helpful because when I was really stuck, I mean, there was a number of them were like, I have no clue. And this is going to be I'll roll the dice and let's hope. I would go then back to those acronyms. So I did refer back to some of those acronyms. And then I wrote down all the competencies. I wrote down, the 8 competencies. I might have written a little description of it as well, so that if I was struggling and going, which, like, Liv, to your point, which competency is this? What are they trying to get at? That would help me as well. So those were some of the key ones that I wrote down in my brain dump.
Jen has also mentioned these acronyms in the chat box. So thank you, Jen. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Liv, coming back to your second question, which was
Yes.
around ethics, I think. You said
Yes,
that.
it's around ethics. Only competency 1 is explicitly about demonstrates ethical practice. But from what my sense is, ethics is going to be throughout the
Yes.
entire exam. Okay, just confirming
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah. That's why that document, Liv, like that ethics and considerations document, it blows it up even more. So I wasn't going to read it, and I thought, because I don't have time, but I'm really glad I did. And I took extra time, like Nikki was saying, each day. Okay, let's break this down, because it's like a 50-page document or something like that, right? So very important read, definitely.
And lots of people asked, how much did you study? Everybody wants to know. People who pass, how much did you study?
I'm a kind of an overkill kind of individual. So I wanted to err on, like, did I put everything together? And I think you get the notice, and I think you have, and forgive me, it was at 60 days or 90 days to write it. So I think I didn't take the whole time I probably prepared half of the duration that they gave us, from the time you get the okay that you got the invite to write the exam. So if that's 60 days and it might have been 90 days. So maybe I took, I did my project plan, I think over maybe 6 weeks or so, something like that.
I think mine was about a month, and I've spent every day some time, maybe a couple of hours, really, but really conscious studying, really, and now probably more than that. 'Cause like I said, so studying, sitting down, writing stuff out, reading things through, processing, and then when I was doing off tasks, daily chores, I'd have the ICF. When I was out walking, I'd have the some sort of podcast on, and really I stuck to a lot of the ICF stuff. And this coach for life, I really liked him because he used to sit on the ethics board also with ICF. So I mean, just it was very good the way. So those are the limiting resources that I use, but really ICF directed, daily, every day.
Mohammed.
Yeah, so Komal, thank you very much, first of all, and to Paula, Nikki, Laurie for your valuable inputs. Before I ask a question, just a little bit of background. I've been doing coaching for like 4 or 5 years as a health and wellness coach, and I've done my functional medicine coaching academy. I've done my national board, a registered health coach from Health Coach Alliance in Canada. And I was introduced through Dr. Michael Arlowski. I don't know if anyone knows about him. So he's one of the wellness coaches, and he recommended me to uh, go and start this ICF thing. Now, my question to all the participants who have gone through the exam, and with my experience through the previous exam, what I think it's not a knowledge exam, it's rather a skill exam. Like Nikki, you have mentioned earlier, right? That it's not about memorizing the theories, theoretical or self-determination or so much, but it's more about client-centered always and like about the skills. Now, having said that, can any one of you explain the percentage of questions like out of those 150, as I have heard, out of those 150 questions or total questions, like how much percentage is ethics, how much percentage is coaching structure or code of the competencies? I mean, how do you emphasize that which, like, how much time you have to give to certain parts while you prepare for the exam? That's number one. Number two, any recommended books other than the ICF resources or code of ethics? Thank you.
I think there is, Mohammed, I think there is something I saw on the ICF website around the breakdown. I don't have it in front of me, but there is something that talks about the percentage for each of the components.
Yeah,
So,
Liv just posted it in the chat, Mohammed.
oh, wonderful, Liv.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay.
There you go. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's the answer. As far as the books, I'm just getting from my experience, it's not about a book because of what we've talked about. It's about situations. You have to be able to apply that information in those situations. So I think looking at those ICF questions, and there are things on the internet available. So some of the questions, the free tests, are the way they show the situation. They're a little bit too simple as far as I'm concerned. They're not the ICF scenarios are a little bit more complex, but they're good things to use just to say, okay, what are they doing here? What do I know about this situation? What's it referring to? What competency is it? And it is about ethics, partnering. Keep that in mind. Client-centered, partnering, and ethical. But yeah, you got to get your head out of the studying that way, I think, and really into processing the information, internalizing that. Internalizing the information, how you use it.
Thank you.
Mohammed, I think Dick, I declared it up front. I utilize Lissa DeHart's paid preparation program, and I felt it was a small investment. And what I appreciated in it was she had recorded sessions and she would talk about how she came up with the answer. And there was no even guarantee even in that was the right answer. Because again, only ICF would know that. But what I appreciated was learning about how to think about the answer in the ICF frame of mind. So I I learn a little better through videos and things like that as opposed to just reading. So I really got a lot out of her program because of the videos that she created to go along with the resources that she pulled together. And what she did was she just accumulated all the resources. So you just go to her site and boom, everything was there. Where I found in the beginning, I was trying to piece stuff together. Oh yeah, I need to go over here. And it was getting a little messy. And so I appreciated it that someone, had the thought to put it all together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coming to Leanne.
Hi, thank you very much for all this information. It's just fantastic and it has answered a lot of my questions. One outstanding question that I have, though, is I think I read on the ICF website that you have to write the exam for ACC, then you have to write the same exam again for PCC. Do I have that right, or am I like off the mark on that?
If you write it for ACC, and you pass, if you get your 500, if you have all the credentials for the next level of learning with coaching, and you have your 500 hours, if you do that within 12 months of having written your ACC, you do not have to write the exam. You can just ask them to go upgrade it. Anything beyond the 1 year, at this point, yes, you do have to rewrite the exam. At this point, it will be the same exam, but that might not stay the same because they said they're doing a pilot program about doing a different ACC exam. I know that was announced at the beginning of the year. I don't know where that is right now. So that's the other thing important to remember is always go back to the ICF to make sure that you're up to date on all the information. It really changed. When they first started this, there was no break. I don't know how those people did it for 3 hours without a break. So I was past that, but there are things changing. So just be aware of that.
All right. Thank you very much.
And Leanne, I had heard, I don't know if I read it somewhere, or I'd heard that there are like a bank of these exams. So there may be 2 or 3 versions. So just if in case your friend wrote it and she has this fantastic memory that she can tell you all the questions, that is not necessarily the same bank. So you could be writing a different exam, but of course it covers all the content. That's the same. It's just there's different banks that ICF has of this exam.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, we are coming close to today's conversation. Any other questions, people? Yes, Liv.
A lot of people have taken Lisa DeHart's class. I'm also taking it myself right now. She generated the questions and she doesn't, she hasn't tested them like how the ICF has tested their questions. And every time I generate questions and I go and test them with my PCCs, my MCCs at my school, not getting agreement there. So we don't actually know the extent to which the exam questions that are generated by our community are what the test takers had in mind. So I'm just wondering, for people who have taken Lisa DeHart's class, how well do you think those scenarios prepared you?
I might be the only one who did, and I felt it was extremely well. I don't know if I would have been able to pull all that together in the time that I had. So I just appreciated learning how to think like ICF. So I did find it very helpful. I wrote to her after and I said I really credit the preparation and the approaches that you used. there's also the ACTC. We're not talking about that today as well, but the thinking as well. I'm hoping to write that this year. The thinking as well for that exam is very much based on this because it's based on the competencies, but with some adaptation for a team as well. So I feel like it would be helpful even in that situation.
Can I just comment? I'm seeing that some people, like, I love what you guys, we haven't talked about this in the chat about getting together in little cohorts and just discussing some of the stuff is a great way to go. And don't get definitive, as Paul even said that that contact, I forget, I'm sorry the name, but nobody's guaranteeing that's the answer for ICF
Right.
because we don't know. But it's the discussion of it. And to really, so then you start throwing around and saying, well, what is that competence? How do you see that? And it opens your mind, because must admit, I'm sorry I didn't mention it. It opened my mind to think a little bit differently too. So good on you to just get together and discuss some of these competencies between yourselves.
I totally second that. I wish I thought of that, Liv. So whoever's doing that, you're gonna be that much more armed together. So, yeah, great idea.
And just a final comment too.
Yes. Go ahead, Nikki.
The thinking through of what might be the best answers is really valuable. When I looked at the sample questions from the ICF, and they were definitely simpler than the ones on the exam, I was also looking at patterns, So when you start thinking about how do I think this through, look at the patterns that are there. So.
Wonderful. It's been a very, very interesting conversation. And thank you so much, Paula, Nikki, and Laurie, for raising your hands and coming and sharing your experience. I think it is incredibly valuable for everybody. Before we go, and thank you everybody to come here with your questions, and whoever is taking your exam in the near future, wish you all the very best. Before we go, there is one tip that I want to leave you with. I took a PCC marker training, which is also on ICF website. And that is an incredibly valuable resource if you want to deepen your understanding of what these competency markers are, what is their identification, and how well they show up in the practice. And it also gives you the CCUs if you are in the process of so it is a CCU program, but it's a wonderful, wonderful resource.
Is that free, Kamal, on their site, or you have to pay for
It has
that?
some very, very nominal price.
Okay.
I don't remember how much I paid, but it was very, very nominal. I must say that.
That's fantastic. Thanks for mentioning that.
It's called PCC Marker Training. Wonderful resource. Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your time here with us. We definitely see that this shared learning space and collaboration is a very, very successful thing. And going forward, we would love to have more and more panel conversations where we learn from each other on various different topics. So thank you, and wish you all good night.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Great to be here.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great week.
Good luck, everyone.